Hi, Joe, Alan, Andy. This is Tyler from New Jersey. All right. I've got a question regarding prepaying mortgage debt, but not the typical primary resident question. I have an investment property that I don't live in anymore. There's roughly 18 years left on a 20-year mortgage at 3.37%. Their current rents cover the mortgage, taxes, insurance, and property management, even with setting aside 10% for repairs, 10% for capital expenditure, and 10% for vacancy. The property still cash flows, but I don't touch the money. It just sits in the property checking account. I'm considering using some of the cash flow to prepay the mortgage, which seems like a sin in the personal finance community. Every time this comes up in a forum or Facebook group, people lose their minds. However, why wouldn't you pay this off sooner to have free cash flow and reduce the total interest payment? If I go ahead with this plan, I'll have the property paid off in roughly 14 years when I'm 47 years old. If rents never go up from there, where they are today, I'll still have $3,000 a month cash flow to pay after paying my tax, insurance, and property management. Plus, I'll save about $20,000 in interest. I understand if I took a couple $100 and invested in the stock market today in a brokerage account, I could do better than 3%. But even if it grows at 8% and we ignore capital gains tax, that's not going to give me $3,000 a month in passive income at age 47. Even backing out ordinary income tax on this $3,000 at the 24% tax bracket, I would still net out $2,000 a month for only a couple $100 today. Making this extra payment today would still leave a positive monthly cash flow. Am I missing something in this equation? FWIW?
For what it's worth.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Did you know that, Big Al?
I had to think about it. I didn't know right off the bat.
Oh, for what it's worth. Wow. I maxed out my 401k, Roth IRA, backdoor HSA, and put $5,000 a year into my brokerage account. I have a 6-month emergency fund, and the mortgage is my only debt. Tyler. All right, Tyler, great question. Big Al has had a lot of investment property, and I think it really depends on your goals, but I'll let you take a crack, and I'll give you my opinion.
Yeah. So here's my feeling is the reason why financial planners will tell you not to is you're paying a mortgage of 3.37% and the stock market, maybe over time, globally diversified portfolio might earn 6 or 7%. So there's an arbitrage there that you can keep, or you create some of that extra profit, you accumulate a down payment, you buy another property, you grow your wealth that much more quickly. Which of course the problem with that is it's more risk as well. But if I take a step, that's kind of the financial planning community. I would take a step back. Me personally, I don't really care if my mortgage is paid off on a rental while I'm working, but it would be really cool if there is no mortgage when I retire, because that's when I'm going to need the cash flow. So I'm actually in favor of that idea, even though I know that I would be missing out on the arbitrage.
So there's two things. There's arbitrage, right? That you're getting a higher rate of return, probably in another investment due to the very low interest rate that he's locked in on for the next 20 years, right? And interest rates are going up and so on and so forth. So it's like, okay, I don't know if we'll ever see interest rates at 3% or 3.5% in the next 15, 20 years. I don't know. Maybe we will, maybe we won't, but it's a low rate, right? Historically. So it probably makes sense to keep that, but I see where his head's at, but he's got to look at things maybe a little bit differently because he's got a mortgage on it. What are you holding that property for right now? Are you holding it for growth or are you holding it for income, right? Because if he's holding it for growth, well, then you probably don't want to pay off the mortgage because then that's leverage, right? Because you're looking at the growth of the overall equity. Versus if you pay it down, your percentage of growth is going to be a lot higher because your cap rate or cash on cash is a lot higher when you have debt. And then you put that money into a side fund. And I get what he's saying. He's like, I'm doing the math. And when I'm 47, this side fund that grows at 8% is not going to produce $3,000 a month. Well, that side fund at that point could probably pay off the entire mortgage, and you still have excess capital on top of the mortgage. So it really depends on what math that he's running and what his goals are. If he wants to retire at 47 and needs the cash, well, then yeah, pay it off. And if that's your goal to have additional cash flow at 47, then by all means. But I don't know, if he wants to retire at 65, it might make sense, to keep the note.
Yeah, I agree with that. It all depends upon retirement. If 47 is the retirement date, then I like the plan. If 65 is, then I would just let it run its course. Use that extra money to build up reserves, to invest in other assets. So yeah, to me, having a mortgage on a rental is actually just fine as long as the rental income covers the payments and you don't necessarily need the cash flow because you're still working. But it's a whole different ballgame when you retire. You might want that cash flow. I think paying a couple $100 a month extra, it psychologically is a little easier than making a lump sum payment, when you retire. Although in his case, he's only gaining about 4 years, so it's not that big a deal.
Run me we have a little bit of time. Run an example, let's say, of like a cap rate or cash on cash. And when you look at real estate with mortgage versus not on a growth angle. So he's still a young guy. And it's like, okay, well, maybe he wants to continue to build his wealth versus getting cash flow. So if he has the note versus not, the rate of return on that property from a growth perspective is going to be higher.
Okay. Yeah. Let me just do a real simple example. So, $100,000 property, which I know you can't find, but the math is easy. So we'll go $100,000 property. We'll say that you put down 20%, $20,000. Okay. Or actually, let's do 10%, easier math. 10% you put down $10,000. So now the property goes up 5%. So it was worth 100,000. 1 year later, it's worth 105,000. So it increased in value by $5,000. But you put a down payment of $10,000, and now your equity, which is the difference between the value and the mortgage, is 15,000, right? So now you got 15. So you made $5,000 of growth on a $10,000 investment. So that's like a 50% growth rate. Of course, you have to figure out the cash flow and debt payments. But if you can cash flow the property, which is hard to do in many locations, not as hard in other locations, but if you can cover the payments, cover the mortgage payment and other expenses, that's a great deal, right? You can earn 50% on your money, maybe you're break even otherwise. But the next year when you make 5,000, now it's 5,000 gain compared to 15,000 of equity. So that rate of return goes down. And some people, after a period of time, they think about, well, maybe I should sell because I've got a lot of equity. I could buy more properties with that equity. And that's how growth accelerates with real estate. It's also how you lose a lot of money quickly when the market goes down. I have personally experienced both of those things. When it's going up, it's super fun. When it's going down, it's not a lot of fun either, because your equity evaporates really quickly with debt when properties are going down.
Yeah. Thank you. Because if, let's say he paid cash for it and $100,000 but then he gets that 5% rate of return, or now it's worth 105. It's a 5% rate of return versus a 50% rate of return, but it's a double-edged sword. So that's why you need time. So he's young, he's got time. And does he have cash flow? Right. So it's cash flowing. He's already got the reserves for vacancies. He's got the reserves for repairs. He's a smart guy. He's got his stuff together. And so if there's a recession or if there's a dip in the overall real estate market, can he continue to cash flow the property fine with the debt service? And if it's too tight, well, then you pay that thing off and cash flow it and live happily ever after. Right. So it depends on risk tolerance. It depends on your goals. It depends on your other assets, so on and so forth. So we can't really look at it in a bubble. But either answer's right, depending on what you're trying to accomplish. So when you're in the Facebook forums and they're losing their minds, those guys are.
Yeah, don't go there. It's not worth your sanity. But I would say, I'll just summarize by saying, if your goal is to hold this property forever, and your goal is cash flow, and this is a good property for cash flow, then your strategy of having it paid off by 47, if that's when you want to retire, I'm all for that. I think that's a great idea.
Are you prepared for retirement? Schedule a free financial assessment with an experienced financial professional right online at purefinancial.com.